Welcome back to the Philos Project channel. This is The Overlook. I'm your host, Dominique Hoffman, and today I feel very convicted to talk about a very troubling aspect of the woke right, of the talking points and the agenda that Tucker Carlson has been pushing on his channel, in addition to Candace Owens and others, which is to make the Jews the enemy of Christians, both in the Middle East and in the West. And this is such a perversion of truth and of history and of historic context and precedent. And it's ideologically disingenuous, and they're weaponizing faith or Bible believing individuals who might not be informed historically or regionally. And the most disturbing part of this all is a manufactured narrative that is very reminiscent of medieval blood libels, such as the Jews are trying to convert Christians. That's one that Candace Owens has put out there through psychology. I think she's claimed that Sigmund Freud used psychology as like mental perversion to push pedophilia and to convert Christians into Jews. So right at the very, very top, because there's this idea that like somehow the Jews are trying to pervert Christians. Every Jew I've ever met, for the most part, I mean, even some who are my friends, don't actually really care that much about Christianity. They don't understand Christianity in the way that we might even be more familiar with Judaism, because as Christians, the Old Testament, as we know it, is the precursor to the New Testament and to the good news and the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so we're familiar with Old Testament stories in a way that your average American Jew or even Israeli is not familiar with the stories or the message or the gospel of the New Testament. And the other reality is that Judaism is an ethno-religion. You are born Jewish. There is no message of the good news. There's no salvation in the same way that exists with Christianity, which is our impetus for missions and for going out into all of the world to preach the gospel. That idea of salvation in the Christian sense doesn't exist in Judaism. There's not even a clear prescribed idea of the afterlife, but that exists in both Christianity and also in Islam. And this is the part of the woke right that I just do not understand. And it's disturbing to me how quickly Christians are willing to buy into these blood libels, to buy into these age-old anti-Semitic tropes that are being repurposed as new information or as conspiracy theories exposing corrupt elites in the United States. Is that Islam and Islamism, particularly the political Islam that has been in the region and even through the Ottoman Empire into modern times with the different Muslim regimes that exist and have spread into Africa, Christians have never fared well under Islamic rule. Now, there might be some exceptions. They are the exception, not the rule, when it comes to looking at political Islam and the weaponization of that. And so my biggest issue with Tucker Carlson, and we're going to look at this, is painting Israel, the Jews, as being the enemy of Christians in Israel. So you'll hear Candace Owens and you're going to hear Tucker Carlson manufacture this moral outrage about the plight of Christians in Israel. In the most recent video that Tucker did with a nun living in the West Bank, which I'm going to do a reaction video with my coworker and good friend Isaac to that this week, if you're interested. He makes the claim that Israel's Christian population is diminishing. That's not true. The Christian population has diminished in the West Bank and Area A territory. I'm going to revisit this in a few minutes in this episode, which is controlled by the PA, not by Israel, both civil and security. And in the Gaza Strip, it has more than half since Hamas has been in power. And so if you look at it statistically, and if you look at it with integrity, the Christian community is not diminishing because of persecution in Israel proper, in sovereign Israel. It's diminishing at the hands of Islamists, at the hands of Hamas, and at the hands of the PA. And if you look even to Lebanon, in Israel's northern border, there's been a huge Christian exile from Lebanon because of Hezbollah. I have many Maronite Christian friends who are among those who had to flee their homes in the historic and the indigenous foothills of some of the first Christian communities after Christ's ministry in Judea, Samaria, Israel, the Galilee region. This is the home of our faith. And some of the first communities to be established and then generationally pass down the good news of our Lord and Savior have disappeared. There is a true ethnic cleansing in the very sense of the term, and a very academic use of that term happening in the Middle East. And it's not happening in Israel. It's happening in many of Israel's neighboring Arab countries. So why bring this up? First, because of truth. I think there's a huge perversion of truth and an inversion of reality that is benefiting very specific actors. When Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens sound more like the president of Iran than of a Bible-believing Christian in the West, there's an issue. We should all zoom out and ask why. Whether it be demonic influence, whether it be financial influence. I think Candace Owens have very vehemently come out and said that she's never accepted money from Qatar or Iran. Tucker Carlson has not been quite as bold, I think, because he's very, very delicately navigated that. I also wonder why no Christian influencers, Tucker Carlson, Charlie Kirk, or anyone of big influence has not point blank asked Tucker Carlson where his interests lie. Who are his donors? We can look at fair registration. The Washington Examiner did. The LLC was paid $180,000, I believe, a month for media services in preparation to and after Tucker Carlson interviewed the Prime Minister of Qatar. So the woke right is going to scream about AIPAC and about Jewish perversion of our U.S. government. Candace Owens went so far in her interview with Tucker Carlson on his podcast to say that the United States has not been a sovereign nation since the assassination of JFK, because she attributes that assassination to the Jews. Now, not only is that a stupid statement and it fails to conceptualize what sovereignty even means, it's also just a lie. And again, a lie for what? A lie for why? I think Candace Owens and her motivations are more theological. I think she ascribes to a very dangerous recessionist replacement theology brand of very extreme traditional Catholicism. I'm a Protestant, and so I'm probably not using the correct term. My coworker Simone will correct me, but essentially trad Catholics. And I think that's extremely dangerous because it's catching mainstream. So right after October 7th, Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson were very, very quiet about the atrocities, like the true horrific atrocities that happened on October 7th. I went to Israel 6 months to the day. I was in the Gaza envelope, at Kfar Aza and other sites, the Nova Music Festival site. I've seen with my own eyes the aftermath of what happened on October 7th. And 6 months in, you could still see blood stained on concrete or in bomb shelters or in front of the Nova Music Festival site. We drove over the actual burn marks of cars in the pavement. One ambulance, I believe they found over 17 bodies that were hiding in the ambulance that Hamas militants burned to the ground, seared into the pavement. I have seen that with my own eyes. I was able to bear witness to those atrocities. And it's like the United States and people who claim to be Christian conservatives have just completely forgotten, or they've bought the lie of Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson to the point that they believe October 7th was manufactured or somehow a manipulation. I mean, that's not a far stretch because Candace Owens apparently doesn't think the Holocaust is actually as bad as it was. It's been propagated. Hitler wasn't actually that bad. That's an entire cohort of conservative Christians or trad guys or in the manosphere on YouTube who are pushing this narrative. The Holocaust happened less than 100 years ago. And Israel is now facing a war front they knew of on the woke left and on the liberal left, but now on the conservative right, the Christian right. And I don't think Israel was prepared for that because I think Israel thought that the Holocaust was so horrific that never again actually meant never again, and that those ideas died after World War II, but they have not. And so that's why I am bringing this up. And also to say, if you believe Tucker Carlson and you believe Candace Owens, listen to what they're saying. You can pick apart almost anything they say and point out real facts, real statistics, or the disingenuous angle in which they present these facts, or they manufactured outrage as good Bible-believing Christians for the plight of Christians in Israel. Again, as I mentioned, they're not talking to people in Israel proper, in sovereign Israel. They're talking to people from the West Bank, in Area A, territories controlled by the PA, or in the Gaza Strip, controlled by Hamas. And instead of asking the tough questions, well, why have Christians disappeared in the Middle East under Islamic regimes or at the hand of Islamism or radical jihad? Let's talk about that, because that's the real threat to Christianity in the Middle East and also in the West. Look at what's happening in the UK. Tucker Carlson will point to Europe and say, America can't be like Europe. And, you know, he makes some insinuations that it's because of the post-World War II liberal world order that we live in, blah, 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 the insinuation, the Jews. No, it's because the mass migration of Muslims from the Middle East who refuse to assimilate to the West, or who even bring radical jihad to the West. Look at London. London is completely controlled by not only Muslims, but Muslims in the government. We're seeing that happen here in the United States, in New York, with the candidate for mayor. When are we going to wake up? Because I promise you, Islamists, their enemy is the Christian. And that is why Qatar is pouring in hundreds of billions of dollars into the United States, because it achieves a much larger objective of both world domination and of converting the infidels, which is you and me, whether you're Jewish or Christian. So that is why I find the manufactured outrage of Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens to be egregious. And I know that they will answer to that before the Lord. So I am not worried. But let's just take a look at what Munther Isaac and the nun that Tucker Carlson chose to platform. Now, Tucker has never interviewed, and he'll say he's not obsessed with Israel. There's an incredible, Milk Bar TV did an incredible compilation showing all the times that a guest on Tucker Carlson's show has mentioned Israel. And also when Tucker has mentioned Israel, he's obsessed with Israel. If you scroll through podcasts since October 7th, most of them have to do with Israel, Christian persecution in Israel, really Muslim territory, AIPAC, the elite corruption, the warmongers, the neocons, all that synonymous for the Jews. He is obsessed. He has like anti-Israel, anti-Jewish derangement syndrome. His is just less obvious than Candace Owens. Okay, so after October 7th, he's never interviewed a Christian like myself who's gone to Israel 7 times. Some of the kindest people I've ever met are Israelis. And to be clear, Israelis, both Christian, Jewish, and Muslim. I have amazing Muslim Israeli friends. That's the other thing, is when Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens talk about the Zionists in Israel. They're so ignorant. They don't understand that some 20% are Arab or Arab Christians who live in Israel, who support their government, the Israeli government. So Tucker Carlson, after October 7th, interviewed this gentleman, Munther Isaac, and he is a radical, or in my opinion, ideologically radical pastor from Bethlehem. Okay, so that was the first. He was, platforming on his network and on his YouTube. Look at the plight of Christians. They're being persecuted by Israel. He's now re-echoing that. This is an interview that he just did. This video has gotten, let's actually see right now what the views of this are at. A lot of Tucker Carlson's recent videos have been hitting over 1 million views. The disinformation is insane. And that's why Qatar and other foreign anti-West, anti-Christian regimes and interests are pouring so much money into the woke right because it's influencing a large swath of the right. I'm going to look up and just see how many views this has now. But what's interesting, and I'm going to react to this video this week with my friend Isaac, as I mentioned, is to look at the timestamps, because we can just kind of get the gist of what his messaging is from the timestamps. Okay, so the video 5 hours ago has 88,000 views. It'll probably hit multiple hundreds of thousands by the end of the week. So let's take note here. Number one lie that completely popped out to me. Why is Israel's Christian population declining? Israel's Christian population is not declining. In fact, it's steadily increased. Tucker Carlson is trying to manipulate his viewer who is ignorant and doesn't know. And if you haven't been to Israel and if you haven't studied Middle East politics, it's extremely complex and difficult to understand. So if you don't have a master's degree in international affairs or are a journalist or have been on the ground, you might just believe what he says. So for the record, Israel's Christian population is not declining. It's declining in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. Now, the West Bank is split into Area A, Area B, and Area C territory per the Oslo Accords, which, by the way, the Palestinians spoiled, not the Israelis. In Area A, where Bethlehem largely falls under, or a large majority of the Palestinian Christian population lives, is under all Arab territory, both civil and security. So you cannot claim that Israel's entire Christian population, sovereign Israel, is declining when you are taking statistics from Muslim-controlled either PA or Hamas territory. That makes Tucker Carlson a liar and a manipulator because he's presenting a falsehood as a truth. And of course, per Tucker Carlson's last 2 years of journalistic or lack of journalistic integrity, he doesn't ask a single hard-hitting question. Okay, let's look at some other of the timestamps. Why are American Christians supporting Israel's persecution of Christians? Well, because Israel's not persecuting Christians. And yes, Israel is comprised of Muslims, Christians, and Jews, all living in a very, very small area. If you don't think people just clash just out of human nature, then you're ignorant, and that's ridiculous. Of course, there are ethno-religious tensions. If you walk around the old city of Jerusalem, you feel it going in between the quarters. Honestly, the most hostile I've ever felt was walking through the Muslim quarter in Jerusalem at the last call to prayer on Ramadan. But again, according to Tucker Carlson, he either ignores the threats or the hostilities of the Muslim world towards the Christian world in the West, or he's complicit, but he never asks a hard-hitting question. He never brings that up. So why are because we believe in the joint security of the United States and of Israel, and because again there's no declining Christian population in Israel proper. That's why Christians being killed in the Holy Land. I've been working in this space for 5 years. Can't think of a single story, not that it doesn't exist. But why doesn't Tucker Carlson ask about the Christians being killed and the almost halving of the population in Gaza since 2005? Why? We used to have a scholarship at Philos called the Rami Ayad Scholarship, which was named after a Palestinian Christian who owned a Christian bookstore in the Gaza Strip who was murdered by Hamas, not by Israel, by the way. And there's plenty of stories like that. So there's just a complete lack of accountability. If you don't believe me, because I always read the comments and people think I'm lying, Bethlehem is in the West Bank, and it is an Area A, which is under the full civil and security control of the Palestinian Authority. Here is a graph. If you've still not grasped what I've said, before you comment in the comment section, here you go. You have Area A. It's administered by the PA. Area B. B stands for both. Administered by the PA and shared security control with Israel. And then you have Area C, which is administered by Israel. The Christian population that this nun is talking about and that Tucker Carlson is talking about is from Area A, controlled by the PA. So for Tucker Carlson, again, to present this as if there is legitimate persecution, systemic persecution of Christians, and ignoring the plight of Christians at the hands of Islamism, which is a ideology, a radical jihad, which from an eschatological perspective, and for Tucker Carlson or anyone who doesn't understand what that means, many Muslims believe that their end time theology, or what has to happen in the end times, is that Christians and Jews are killed. In fact, every Jew has to be killed. And that's in the Hadith. All right. So again, let's just zoom out. Let's stop talking about Israel, actually, because Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens love to fixate on Israel. So the Christians are only important when we're talking about Israel. I believe I saw a clip where Candace Owens was saying that people were lying about Christians being killed in Syria. Again, like the Jews, or like the propaganda machine is like trying to make up that Christians, did I say Jews? I meant Christians if I said Jews. That the Christians in Syria are actually not being killed. Okay, let's not look at Syria, because Syria is really complicated to understand right now. News trickles out. It's hard to ascertain what is true, what's not true. Let's look at other parts of the Muslim world, shall we? Okay, cool. I'm getting snarky, and I don't want to be snarky because I'm about to talk about true religious persecution. Okay. 70 Christians were found beheaded in the Democratic Republic of Congo back in, I believe, it was in 2025. Back in March, maybe? Yeah, back in March. This was reported on the 10th March 2025. And they were killed. They were targeted because of their faith, and they were killed by a radical militant group, the Allied Democratic Forces, with proven ties to ISIS. Again, Tucker doesn't talk about ISIS or what ISIS did to Christians across the Middle East. Candace didn't talk about this, nor did Tucker. Okay, but this was not one-off. Let's look at what's happening in Sudan. This was back in February. This is when this article is coming from, but it's documenting a very long period of persecution by Sudan's Rapid Support Forces, who are guilty of committing an ongoing genocide in Sudan. They are also radical jihadists. And who are the victims? The victims are Christians. Okay, this is ongoing. No one reports about this, though. I mean, the conflict in Sudan has been going on for well over a decade. Okay, so now let's look at Nigeria. And this is a graphic photo, so I apologize for not warning. And this was recent. This was June of this year. Jihadists massacre over 200 Christians in Nigeria. And there was an update that at least 50 more were massacred since this was reported in the article that I'm pulling from. So this is real Christian genocide happening in parts of Africa that have been radicalized by Islamic jihad. And Candace and Tucker are quiet. They're not curious as to why the Christians are dying in Africa or the rest of the Middle East, which we're about to look at. One final piece of information to look at the rest of the region. They're not interested because it's too far from Israel and they can't blame the Jews. And if they can't blame the Jews, then they have to zoom out and ask, well, who is the enemy of both the Christians and the Jews? And that would be the Islamists, but that doesn't fit their agenda because this America First movement is actually about anything but America First. If you listen to Tucker Carlson, he's an apologist for Russia, for Iran, claiming that Iran was going to like wipe America off the face of the map if we just provoked them too much and our sons were going to go die in Iran. Are you kidding me? Iran's a paper tiger. Iran's barely surviving. And yet he played a critical role in making the United States targeting of Iran's nuclear facilities after decades of Iran not cooperating and being a belligerent actor and antagonist in the region. Tucker Carlson was a key player in making that controversial. That should never have been controversial. And let's talk about the church in Iran and the lack of religious pluralism in Iran. When Tucker Carlson interviewed the president of Iran, he didn't ask him about how the Christians are faring in his country. And of course, Tucker Carlson gave the president of Iran the honor of calling Iran a country, not a regime. But Israel is a regime. The Israeli government, Benjamin Netanyahu, the evil Jews. You know where the largest growing underground churches in the world? Iran. Not open, underground. It was in China. Now it's in Iran. First, because persecution the Lord has used to bring about the gospel and the need for the good news in Iran. But not because the government allows it, not because religious pluralism flourishes in Iran. Why didn't Tucker ask the president of Iran that? If he's just so curious, if he has such a beating heart for his fellow Christians, the answer is he doesn't care. He's using his religion as a weapon to misinform the masses. And that is a particularly egregious form of blasphemy. And I publicly rebuke him for that. I made this graph after October 7th to visualize how the Christian population across the Middle East, these are indigenous communities, like I said, have diminished greatly under both the Ottoman Empire and then the Islamist regimes that replaced them. And the reason I'm looking at other Christian communities outside of Israel is because then you can't scapegoat the Jews and you're forced to confront the threat of Islamism. All right, so some historical context. The Middle East is home, or was for many of these communities, to the first Christian communities following Jesus' ministry in Galilee, Judea, and it quickly spread across the region. These indigenous Christian communities comprise Maronite, Greek, Armenian, Coptic, Chaldean, and Assyrian churches. Under the Ottoman Empire, indigenous Christians face systemic persecution. They received the status of dhimmi under the Ottoman Empire, which has only been exacerbated by the last several decades by Arab nationalism and the rise of Islamism and political jihad. So in the 20th century, and I spent a very long time getting these stats because there's not a lot of representative sense of data from the fall of the Ottoman Empire or before the First World War, which is really the catalyst for the fall of the Ottoman Empire. So in the 20th centuries, the Christian population of the region comprised approximately 13.6%. In 2020, the population of Christians diminished to 4.2%. And by 2050, so in 25 years, experts predict that it will be less than 3.6. And that's generous. Essentially, in 25 years, there will be almost none of the indigenous Christian communities in the region. And this isn't because of Israel. Israel doesn't control its Arab enemies. This is because of Islamism and its ideological contradiction to religious pluralism and to Christianity. So let's look at the countries and how they have declined in Christian population. So Lebanon, in 1910, there was 77.5% of the population identified as Christian, and today it's approximately 32.4%, and that is directly as a result of Hezbollah. In Egypt, in 1910, approximately 18.7% is now diminished to approximately 5% today. Again, the Muslim Brotherhood. Jordan in 1910 was approximately 5.8%. That's diminished by over half to approximately 2.1%. Syria in 1910 was 15.6%. It's approximately 2% now. Iraq, 6.3%, less than almost 1% today. Turkey, 21.7%. Let's talk about Muslim nationalism. It's Turkish nationalism, so it's a little bit different than Arab nationalism, but still political Islam. And this desire to restore some sort of like a political Muslim caliphate in the region. Today, it's less than 0.2%. So the Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owenses of the world cannot claim that the Jews are the villain of Christians when you look at the Middle East. And again, look at the UK. In the United Kingdom, if you pray outside of an abortion clinic silently in your head, that is a thought crime and you can go to prison for it. Authorities have passed out notices to homes that are in the vicinity of abortion clinics that even praying within your house, a private place, is a crime. And yet Muslims gather on the street for the call to prayer during Ramadan. And that's fine. Crime is rampant. Young women oftentimes get brutally raped, murder, gang violence. But to be a Christian in the UK today, which is the birthplace of the Enlightenment and of negative and positive human rights, and it's the basket of the West. Like, it is the ideological cornerstone and philosophical and political cornerstone and historic cornerstone for what is the West today. And being a Christian in England today is to be a minority and to be persecuted by your government over speech. That's the threat to the United States. And many in the US on the left and the right are so comfortable with Hamas and Islamism. Why? Because the Jew is the enemy. Whether you're on the left and you think the Jew is a white supremacist, or you're on the right and you think that the Jew is like the spawn of Satan, literally, that's what some people think. The Jew is the problem. A very, very small percentage of people in the United States or in Israel compared to the global population is the problem. They are the chief villains of the world and of genocide and of wars and of the United States winning World War II, which is apparently the most horrific thing that could have ever happened, according to Tucker Carlson and Daryl Cooper. So if you have people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Daryl Cooper and Dave Smith apologizing for the West winning World War II and who manufacture moral outrage about Christians, and they're not looking at the threat to our own Christian population, and they're not looking at the threat for Christians in the Middle East from a honest and a way that honors journalistic integrity, then you have to ask the question why. And the question why is because Qatar has flooded hundreds of billions of dollars into the United States. And for whatever these content creators' reasons are for cooperating with these actors is, I think Tucker Carlson, it's political, it's his own self-interest. I think Candace Owens is very theologically motivated. It doesn't matter what their motives are. It matters that they are a political line. They're influencing culture and our politics. And this is not going away. Come the next presidential election on the right, the woke right versus traditional conservatives is going to be a dividing policy position for the GOP. But in this video, specifically, what I get outraged about is weaponizing Christianity and true Christian persecution in the region and the threat to the West for whatever their self-interest are. And with that, I will leave you. I am going to respond to the interview with the nun. I'm going to react to it with my coworker Isaac. So look out for that this week on this channel. Like always, please like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you in the next episode.